You're watching Ticker Work. I'm Ahron Young. Here is a question for you. Is confidence a predicator for getting that promotion you've been after? Is it a male thing? Is it a female thing? And as we heard from Margaret Thatcher years ago, she didn't like to hire women in her cabinet because she was worried that women were too emotional. Let's bring in Sensei Karen Gately from Corporate Dojo, the host of Black Belt Leader on this network. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
Now, don't get emotional on me, but this idea that confidence is something that isn't a predicator, but it could be for men, but not for women. Tell us about this. It sounds ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, exactly. We've all been hearing as women for a long time that, one of the challenges or roadblocks in our way is not expressing enough confidence, not having enough conviction to win promotions. So recently some research was done to really look at that and explore the extent to which that's the case. And what this particular study found was that, even with greater confidence, there wasn't that same predictive element to winning the promotions. They looked at a group of men and their confidence levels, if you like, looked at a group of women in the same way, and then compared how many of those people were able to achieve their career goals in the
How do we measure confidence in the workplace? What do we mean exactly? When I think of confident, I think of going to the pub and chatting to someone new. But talk to us about what confidence in the workplace means.
Well, that might be an example, right? So there's lots of psychometric tests that look at our character traits, and this particular survey looked at things like, how comfortable or otherwise we feel in uncertain circumstances, or, when we're faced with a challenge, the extent to which we have an inclination to want to lean forward and give that a go versus step away from it. So it might be that, having that courage to step forward and talk to that stranger at the bar is a reflection of one of those character traits. So it really does look at, some of those behavioural tendencies in response to a bunch of statements. How would we actually respond in those circumstances?
It's interesting when we talk about the pub kind of idea and guys having confidence, it's because maybe you have a couple of beers and you're with your mates and off you go. In workplaces that I've worked in that have been dominated by women, you can end up with quite cliquey groups that they rely on that for the confidence there as well, as opposed to the individual coming through. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think there absolutely this argument to say that there can be comfort in numbers,
Yeah.
so that when we're surrounded by colleagues that have similar missions, or feel like we have each other's backs, then it can embolden us. It can certainly cause us to feel more comfortable to step forward. Obviously there's a big difference between feeling that camaraderie and that support with our colleagues to actually then becoming cliquey. I think that's quite a different behaviour, in that tends to be quite excluding of other people. But yeah, absolutely. I think that there's real relevance that when we feel part of a strong team and we have that backing, that we're more likely to back ourselves.
So if confidence isn't enough for women to have to get ahead, what else is there?
Yeah, look, I think the real challenge here is some of the unconscious biases that are going on still in workplaces. Again, other research shows that if a woman does display strong behaviours that we typically associate with men, that can in fact be off-putting. So some of the things that we look for in a man, for example, in a leadership role, is that certainty, that strength, that determination. Again, that strength of character that says that they're going to push through and make things happen. The challenge for women is if we come across as strong, in some people's eyes, that can be perceived as pushy. That can be seen as problematic indications of how that woman is likely to behave. So really what clearly we need to do as a community is overcome these biases and educate ourselves and understand that that's what's going through our minds. Classic being the former Prime Minister of England there, saying she won't hire women because they can be too
Well, I mean, she was
emotional.
famous for it. She didn't have any women in her cabinet. But how much of this kind of goes to that old-fashioned British mentality? And I, by that, and I'm saying as I think, so bear with me. But you think
Sure.
of Queen Elizabeth, right? One of the most prominent women in power around the world, if not the most prominent woman. She's been reigning for 150 million years. May she reign forever. But she's not an emotional woman at all. She doesn't show any signs of almost being female. The idea of
Yeah.
her being pregnant seems kind of weird when you think about it. The idea of her being vulnerable seems weird as well. Yet we've
Yeah.
learned and we've been taught to accept the vulnerability of her son, Prince Charles. We've been taught the vulnerability and to come up with excuses for the behavior of Prince Harry as well, where he dressed up in a Nazi uniform. We think of the way that Diana was treated because she wasn't the stiff upper lip. So,
Yeah.
how much of our, I guess, cultural identity is actually based on looking towards the Queen and going, well, she's a woman, but
Yeah.
you wouldn't really know. She's almost genderless in that regard.
Yeah. And I think what we're seeing in her is she's super composed, right? You know, she's keeping everything close to her chest, and she's certainly role playing when she's in the public eye. So,
Mm.
you know, I think that where being emotional can become a challenge is if we're not being rational, if we're being too emotive and just driven by those emotional needs or critically those insecurities. So, you know, I think emotion is an incredibly powerful thing in business or in any walk of life. It's just how we
Yeah.
actually channel that. So I
Yeah.
think, you know, women want to be successful, absolutely bring your authentic self, but at the same time demonstrate that you are able to remain composed when you need to. You are able to
Hmm.
remain rational or detached emotionally
Mm.
when the situation actually calls for that.
Yep. And there are plenty of us blokes who need to remember the same thing as well. Karen Gately, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, that's Ticker Work for this week. Catch it on the app, head to our YouTube page as well. And as always, we'd love to hear your feedback, your comments about the conversations we've been discussing. I'm Ahron Young, back soon.